All right. Hello, everybody. Hope you all are doing well. This is DFS Army's tournament strategy show. It's been a little bit, guys. It's been a little while since I've been back. Took Wednesday and Thursday off because we had some work stuff to focus on, but we're back. We have a non-late swap slate too, which will keep things interesting. Jay, I see you. There's definitely some strategies that I like to use in non-late swap. I'm hoping I'm one of those people that really enjoys this style. It creates a lot of strategy. You have to think about things. You have to take educated risk. So we'll talk about some of those situations. Unfortunately, a lot of the tools I typically use haven't updated for this slate yet. So a lot of my game planning will focus, and I'll be able to share a lot more on the pre-lock show. But there's still some just obvious situations that we'll touch on throughout this slate. So yeah, Jay, we'll get to it. Thomas, I hope you're doing all right. Um, I didn't play over the last few slates, so there's not much for me to review from last night. Yeah, Jay, sim model is so clutch. I don't know. I feel like I've been using the sim model since day one, and now everyone's like sim model. I'm like, yeah, finally, people are picking up on it. Dixon, what's up, man? Yeah, if you all could hit the like and subscribe button, it definitely does help our channel continue to grow and helps me be able to continue to keep doing this. So if you all could do that, that'd be awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get into today's slate. We'll start off with the Hornets going up against the 76ers. And honestly, there's not really too much news here. We did just get some news from the Sixers side of things, but we'll get to that later. This is the second lowest total game on the slate. Hard to be overly excited about it. Sixers haven't been that bad defensively over the last few games, and the Hornets suck, which is hard for me to say as a Hornets fan, but it's true. I usually like taking shots on Bridges or Miller. They're seeing decent ownership, though, so it's really hard for me to get overly excited about playing these guys. Cody Martin is looking pretty chalky. I might be missing something here, but I really don't get it as of right now. He's not someone I'm trying to force exposure to. His performance is all over the place. He does have some upside, which is why I'm not going to take him out my player pool or anything like that, but I don't really understand the play. So the Hornets aren't a team I'm planning on getting too much exposure to tonight, but again, that's something that could change a little bit later. Thomas said, "You think for single entry only play guys that are for sure playing?" No, 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 no. Well, I mean, so I don't think we have this situation today where we're going to have a ton of questionables, but in general, I try to do as much research on the players who are questionable before lock. Right now, it's still early. We'll get some of this news where we don't really need to overthink it right now, but around like 3:30, 4:30, 5:30, especially once you get to 6 to 7, that's when I really start digging deeper, seeing what the news is saying, seeing what some of the insiders are saying, and I make an educated guess. If I don't know, we'll have a good example here soon. In MME, I take risks to still play a little bit of both sides. In single entry, I just go with my gut, with what I'm leaning towards, because I've had some single entry and three max takedowns, winning a lot of money by simply playing the guy no one else is because he's questionable and everyone else was afraid to do it. It's risk and it will burn you sometimes, but it's also one of the easiest ways of having a takedown. So for me, I don't try to avoid playing it, but you have to know what you can manage. Anthony, I am. I am in North Carolina. Good old North Carolina. I've been here forever, but I might be looking towards moving probably towards next year. So we'll see. Dave, agreed. Appreciate the reminder, man. I hope you're doing well. All right, let's look at the Sixers. We did just get the news, and this is pretty big, that Kelly Oubre is questionable. This is news that we just got, so it's not updated or anything like that. But if Kelly O is out, you can see I already like the Sixers more than most of the field. I like Buddy Hield already, just because he's been in bad form over the last 2 to 3 games, but he's had pretty tough matchups against some pretty solid defensive teams. I think he gets back on track here. Unfortunately, he might not be the low-owned leverage play I want him to be, especially if Kelly O gets ruled out. It does make him a much easier play, but higher ownership, which is all I really care about. But Buddy Hield, love this spot for him. I will be over the field over 7%. If Kelly O is out, he'll be a focal point for me. Paul Reed hasn't been great here recently. He's getting a little cute playing him. I wouldn't play him in single entry, but in MME, which is what I'm doing, I'm going to take some shots on him here. Tobias Harris is extremely viable at 6,700. He's probably a core play if Kelly O gets ruled out. Tyrese Maxey is showing up a lot for me in my early runs. He's cheaper than we've seen him in a while. He has a great matchup going up against the Hornets. I'm fine with him showing up, but I'm not planning on forcing it. If we get news or if projections update and he starts to show up less, as of right now at his ownership, I'm not going to try to force more exposure. But he's showing up a ton. I'm fine with it. All the Sixers are much better if Kelly O gets ruled out. Anthony said, that's what's up. Mooresville, nice. All right, another person in North Carolina. I feel like there's a good amount of DFS Army members here in North Carolina, but I'm sure there's a lot of people watching who are like, nah, don't care. Jay, what's up, man? Everyone, yeah, North Carolina, man, everybody, everywhere. Next up, we have the Cavs going up against the Pistons. So this is where we're starting to see some questionable tags. Donovan Mitchell, questionable. Karis LeVert, questionable. Thankfully, this is, again, one of the first games on the slate, so we don't have to worry about late swap. We'll get this news in time. Donovan Mitchell has tended to play in these spots. I'm expecting him to play, but if he doesn't, then we'll have time to react to that and play a crap ton of Cavs. But as of right now, I'm expecting Donovan Mitchell to play. He's not someone I'm trying to force a ton of exposure to. I hope you all followed and played Evan Mobley last time out because he crushed and no one else played him. And once again, I'm willing to go back here. I like Jared Allen tonight. I like playing bigs against the Pistons. Jared Allen has had a very slow and steady decline, and I expected that. He typically does that when Evan Mobley's out. He's still a very viable player. He has a ton of upside still. Just the upside is a little bit less consistent when Evan Mobley's there. Just because Evan Mobley has a higher usage rate, and now that he's seeing more consistent minutes, Evan Mobley has a little bit more upside, in my opinion. So I'm going to force exposure to Evan Mobley once again, and then Jared Allen is showing up a good bit for me naturally. Outside of that, I don't love any of the pieces. Karis LeVert is getting a good amount of ownership. If he plays right now, I'm right around 20% ownership, so I'm close to field weight. But I'm still waiting on a lot of my data and things to look a little bit deeper into, matchup-wise, fantasy point-wise, things of that sort. But Karis LeVert is not one of those guys I'm overly excited about forcing exposure to right now. So that's how I'm thinking about it. Donovan Mitchell, again, similar story. I like some of the other pay-up options more. So he's not really showing up for me at all right now, and I'm okay with that. The matchup is great. It is really just his price tag. I just feel like Donovan Mitchell, he hasn't really had those 60, 70-point performances ever since this team started to get a little bit more healthy. If Karis LeVert gets ruled out, I'm a little bit more open to Mitchell, but again, just scenarios that we'll get more clarity into before lock. Now, the Pistons are interesting. The Cavs are a really good defensive team. They're not a team I like to pick on too much. I've been saying this forever. Cade Cunningham is still too cheap. 7,900 is close to where he should be. Matchup isn't great. I wish he was lower owned. 13% feels about right for him. So he's not someone that I'm looking at as like a potential leverage play, but he is still too cheap. So I'm going to have like a 13, 15% min on him, something like that. Unless the sim model also really likes him, then I'm open to making him a leverage play once again. Outside of that, Jalen Duren is fine, but I'm not planning on forcing exposure here. You all know me. I don't like playing or forcing exposure to the Cavs. One trend that everyone's already talking about and something that will happen a lot, most people play the earlier games when late swap is no longer an option. I don't know if that's going to happen on day one, but if they continue to do this, it's something that will happen just over time naturally because people get burned by playing guys in the later games sometimes, and over time people will not want to take that risk. For me personally, I just look at slates one at a time, and so you'll see a trend, and I've kind of always done this. I tend to like the later games slightly more because there's more risk involved there. So again, I'm not trying to go out of my way going too heavy on some of these early guys, especially if we have questionable still by the time we get to lock. I expect the earlier games to be a little bit over-owned. All right. Mavericks against the Celtics. For the Mavericks, Luka Doncic is questionable, but we're all expecting him to play here. He has an ankle and nose injury. Nose injury we've known about for a while. The ankle injury is new, so I think that's why we're a little bit more concerned about Luka potentially missing this game. But again, this is another situation, 30 minutes after lock. Ideally, we would know about this well before lock, and we know what to do at this point if Doncic gets ruled out. So we'll do that if that happens. But Luka's in play. I think everyone knows I'm going to have a 10% min on Luka, just matching the field on him if he plays. Maybe 15% just to give me a little bit of leverage here because I do like Luka tonight. But, we just got to wait and see for that news. And then for the Celtics, they're healthy. And the Celtics, when they are healthy, are never a team I try to go too crazy on. Let's see. Anthony said you love Strus, Mitchell, and Mobley. I love Mobley. Mitchell's fine. Strus, I would like a lot more if LeVert is out, but we know Strus can get hot, so I don't hate any of those. You're on Cade too, Thomas? All right, man. Hope he comes through for us. Yeah, Duran could crush. Drummond and Vooch, yeah. I mean, who doesn't beat the Pistons, man? Every big crushes against the Pistons. But you're right. That's what keeps... oh wait, I have it backwards. Duran against the Cavs, I actually don't love that much, but I like his price tag. So I don't plan on getting too much Duran. But Drummond and Vooch are pretty good, man. Not gonna lie. They've been really good or solid this season. What's up, MB? Hope you're doing all right. Luka might sit because of last game workload. Yeah, wouldn't shock me. Would actually kind of make me more excited about this slate because it would balance out the Memphis Trailblazers chalk if we had another super chalky situation, and that could really give us a little bit of leverage if we want to go over on one of those situations. So I'm not mad at it, but again, we just got to wait and see. So for the Celtics tonight, going up against the Mavs, pretty neutral matchup. This is a positive game environment. There's 3 really strong game environments. There's this Mavs-Celtics game, which is why I'm not trying to fade this game at all. There's the Warriors-Raptors game, the exact same total as the Mavs and Celtics. Then the highest total on the slate is this Pacers-Pelicans game. So these are the 3 games I'm trying to build around alongside this Memphis and Portland game. And then I'm looking at one-offs from like the Hornets, Sixers, Cavs, Pistons, Kings, Timberwolves. So that's just like my general thought process around the slate. Unfortunately, with the Celtics being healthy, it's really hard to decide who you really want to take the shot on. Again, I'm going to wait on the sim model to help me decide on if I'm going to take a shot on Tatum or Brown. Porzingis is in play, but he's not someone I'm going to try to force exposure to today as of right now, with him being so chalky already. Matchup is fine against the Mavs. I'm just not overly excited about it. Holiday is cheap, and that's what keeps him viable. I have a good amount of exposure to him, and I plan on at least being around field weight, really just because of the price tag. Sim model is up and running. Uh-oh. Let's see. I'm going to change it over to my other screen. It's not, maybe, yeah, it is updated. Sweet. Yeah, just give it a quick look. Yep, that doesn't surprise me. So yeah, ideally, I'll be around field weight on Tatum. He's the one I'm willing to put a 15% min on. Brown and Porzingis, if they don't show up by themselves, I probably won't get to. But again, I still have a lot of digging to do into these numbers and seeing if I agree with them or not. And then next up, for the next game, we have the Warriors going up against the Raptors. For the Warriors, Andrew Wiggins is going to be out for a while. So, I mean, I guess that's worth mentioning, but we've known about that. Nothing really new here. What I like is the soft matchup against the Raptors. You guys know I like to pick on the Raptors. Curry is low owned, and once again, I'm going to take a shot on him. Potentially, I'll make him a leverage play, which would mean I'm double the field. But more realistically, I'll probably be around 10%, 6 to 10% on him. But he's someone else I will definitely have exposure to tonight. Kuminga, let me see if the sim model agrees with me on this first. 6,400. It doesn't agree with me too much. It actually likes Derek White a good bit, so I might need to look a little bit closer at him as well as someone to potentially force exposure to. Brandon Miller stands out a little bit as well. Okay, interesting. Anyway, Curry's someone I'll force exposure to. Kuminga's someone I want to force exposure to just because this Raptors front court is weak and they're a team that we can pick on. I would love to see Kuminga show up a little bit by himself and Draymond Green. I think they both have potential for high upside, but I like Kuminga a little bit more just because he's a little bit more aggressive from a scoring standpoint. So they're both on my radar. Again, this is a game I want to target. So those three, Curry, Kuminga, Green, are really like my main guys I'm considering right now. Curry being the only sure thing for me right now. Chris Paul, Clay coming off the bench, not overly excited about that. Moses Moody, 4K, doesn't do too much for this team. Not someone I'm trying to force exposure to, but again, if he shows up a little bit by himself, I'm not mad at it. For the Raptors tonight, again, another team that's pretty healthy. Chris Boucher is questionable, but that doesn't really matter too much these days. He doesn't see too much run. But I really, again, will have to have exposure to this team. We were on Scotty Barnes pretty early, and now he's pretty expensive, which is unfortunate. Again, I like this game. His ownership is probably going to make it a little hard for me to match the field on. I'm going to try to, but again, not someone I'm overly passionate about. I think Quickly and Barrett will be a little interesting. I need to look a little bit closer at them to pick a favorite. I don't really want to play both, I don't believe. And Jakob Poeltl is fine at 6,400, but none of these guys really stood out for me too much. Basically, I know I want to take a shot here on one of the Raptors, but I haven't picked a favorite yet. So I'll need to do a little bit more research and digging there. But again, Mavs Celtics game, Warriors Raptors. These are games I don't want to forget about. Jason, what's up? Said in all the years of DFS, my two greatest contributors to a winning lineup are one, I had the value piece that usually popped up right before a lock and he performed 10x for me. And second, I picked the right stud. Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's similar to my success too. Like hitting on the value piece that you usually get right before a lock that people didn't have time to switch to or they were a little nervous about. And you usually get that because of a late injury tag, or you might see. I remember one time B-Dubs and I were talking about Trey Murphy. I think this was last year. He was just projected a little bit off, and no one in the industry was on him with him returning from an injury. And it wasn't really him being out for a serious amount of time or for a serious reason. So we were like, hey, let's just force a little bit of exposure to him. And we crushed that night. So sometimes just being willing to take a little bit of risk in certain situations helps a lot too. And for me, just being willing to play guys that other people aren't and just trying to find a good reason for it helps a lot. And then picking the right stud is always it. If a stud's in the nuts line, you need the right one. Easier said than done, but true. All right. So yeah, I like the Raptors, but I haven't picked a favorite yet, unfortunately. And then we have the shittiest game on the entire slate. And it's also the game we all have to play out of necessity. So we'll talk through it. MB said, are scores higher or lower on no late swaps? They should be lower, but again, it always just depends on injury news and things of that sort. So if the reason why scores get so high here recently is because we've been able to make pivots to the obvious low, cheap play. Like Jason mentioned, having the right value piece that goes off for a lot of points. The reason why it's been a little bit harder here recently to have like a ton of takedowns is because it's been easier for people to, a larger amount of people have ownership to those right value pieces. With late swap, less people are able to think through it as much, and less people, probably more importantly, are willing to take the risk to take those shots on guys who we might not know are even starting yet. So that's where the lower scores come from. There's just less value that goes for 10x. But if you're willing to take some of those shots and take a little bit more risk, then you can be the one who has the higher scores because you took that shot. So yeah, in general, lower scores, but again, that's not every night. Okay, I was procrastinating. I don't want to talk about these guys. So the Trailblazers have DeAndre Ayton listed as doubtful. He's probably not going to play. Moses Brown, questionable. Scoot Henderson is out. Malcolm Brogdon is out. Shaden Sharp is out. That is a lot of guards for this team that they are missing. Robert Williams is going to be out for a season, but we've known about that for a while. And so what you see automatically when you look at this Portland team is a lot of dark green here. Anthony Simons, I am always honest about. I have a bias. He's helped me win a lot of money over the years. And so I am always comfortable playing Anthony Simons. He's showing up a lot for me in my early runs. And at 7,500, it's really hard for me to think of a reason to not do that. Jeremy Grant is showing up for me a lot. I like him. I probably will put like an 80% cap on him, though, just so he's not in 100% of my lines. And then Walker and Murray, I'll be honest, I need to look a little bit closer at before I feel comfortable even rostering them. As of right now, it looks like that's not going to happen, but they're low owned and they should see minutes. So I want to dig deeper there and make sure we're not missing anything. Duop Reith is fine. He's showing up a good bit for me for good reason. They're missing Ayton and Biggs all across the board. So he's totally very viable at 4,200. Kamara, same exact situation, basically. They use him as a big. Should see plenty of minutes at 4,200. I'm okay with him being in the mix. And then Matisse Thybulle, everyone's favorite streaky shooter who will burn you more often than not. Again, I'm going to look a little bit closer at his situation as well because I think it could be worth taking a shot here. So I like the Trailblazers tonight, even though I don't like that I have to play them. They're just missing a lot of people. And speaking of teams missing a lot of people, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. G.G. Jackson, questionable. Luke Kennard, doubtful, starting guard. John Concher, doubtful, starting guard, out. Jaren Jackson Jr., out. Derrick Rose, out. These guys are missing so many people, and that's why you're seeing so much dark green here. Again, in these situations with the Trailblazers and the Memphis Grizzlies, one or two of these guys are going to burn us, but the vast majority of these guys will get us where we want to go. Vince Williams is someone I feel pretty solid about. He's been a starter for this team for a while. He's been playing consistent minutes. Trailblazers are a bad defense. That's another thing. Both of these defenses are not good. And so it really elevates the amount of upside that some of these players have if they can get going. Santi Aldama should start 4,900. He's going to be in a crap ton of my lines. GG Jackson, if he plays tonight, I think he burned some people last time around. I don't care about what happened last game. If he plays, he's 4,800. He's in a good spot. As long as we don't hear of minute limits or anything like that, gonna have a crap ton of them. Jordan Goodwin is the lock of the slate. He's been in decent form, 4,700. He should get at least around 28 fantasy points tonight on the low end, and I would expect a lot more out of him than that, to be honest. So he makes a crap ton of sense. Zaire Williams, this is where I start to get a little bit less excited about some of these guys, but again, he's going to be in my mix, and he has shown us this season he has upside as well. So totally fine with him. Lamar Stevens at 4,100, I'm not as excited about. He's another guy I need to look a little bit closer at, make sure I'm not missing anything, but I don't want him showing up too much for me personally. But again, that could change. Laravia, I'm not really looking at or considering. Jemison should start. I think we're all expecting him to start. I know Underdog has him projected to start. And as long as he starts at 3,300, another guy I expect to see a lot of in my lines tonight. So this is another game just because of pure value and lack of other viable options for these teams that I'm going to have a lot of. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. And again, not overly excited about guys like Watanabe or Stevens or Laravia, unless GG Jackson gets ruled out. If he's ruled out, these guys are going to have to play a lot of minutes. And so that would make them more viable. But for now, hopefully he just plays so we don't have to get that cute. Because, oh man, if we have that much value on this slate, all the studs are going to be chalky. It's going to be hard trying to find the one that's low owned. Maybe it's Steph. I hope it's Steph. But we'll see. So I like those teams a lot. And then we have the Pacers. This is the highest total game on the slate. You guys know my philosophy here. I force exposure to these spots. Jay said Duop is popping. Yeah, I mean, he's in a great spot, and I'll be playing him. Dallas versus Celtics is going to be an overtime game. Watch big points unless Luka's out. Yeah, that's the big piece, and I like that game because the game environment should be back and forth. The sports books have a pretty wide spread at -9 or at a 9-point spread, so I'm curious to know if maybe they are leaning a little bit more towards Luka being out. But I thought the same thing. I thought the spread should be pretty close, so I don't disagree with you, man. MB said, "Will Walker get more minutes at center?" Um, I don't know for certain, but I would say, yeah, I want to look a little bit closer at rotations. It wouldn't shock me if he sees a little bit more minutes at center, but I haven't looked into the situation enough to know for sure. Trey Jemison, yeah, like he should start, and if he does, he's gonna be everywhere for me. All right, going back to Pacers, I like Tyrese Halliburton. I play the stud, especially when they're low owned and the highest total game. Rinse, wash, repeat. Probably just a 5% min. I don't want to go too crazy on Halliburton because the matchup is pretty tough, but he's too low owned for a good game environment. He has lacked upside a little bit. We haven't seen those 60, 70-point games we saw earlier this season. Usage rate has gone down a little bit, so there are good reasons that explain his low ownership, but he's also cheaper than he was back then. I think he was hitting like 10K at one point there. 9,400, I still think there's some upside with the good game environment. Aaron Nesmith is questionable. If he gets ruled out, in theory, it does make guys like Nimbard and Mathurin more viable. Just because of some of the value we have on this slate, though, it still won't change too much for me. And I wanted to try and find a reason to take a shot on Siakam or Turner, and ultimately I haven't found a reason for that yet. For the Pelicans, again, another team that's healthy, which is great for no late swap, but would love it if we were given, if it was a little easier to choose between these three. What I'll say is, again, this is the highest game total on the slate. The sim model does like Brandon Ingram a good bit, so he's someone I will definitely force exposure to. Let me see with CJ. It usually likes CJ, so it wouldn't shock me if it likes him today. Yeah, it does. What about Zion at 8,100? Yeah, it likes him a little bit, but Brandon Ingram's really going to be the priority for me. I can tell you he's going to be a leverage play for me, so I'll be double the field on him. And then because this is the highest total game on the slate, I will force exposure to Zion to at least match the field, and I'll be ideally over the field on CJ today with probably like a 10% min. The other options here I'm not overly excited about. And then we have the last game on the slate with a pretty big questionable tag. We have De'Aaron Fox listed as questionable, but he was at shoot around. So that increases the likelihood that he'll play a little bit. Of course, we've seen this go a lot of different ways. Ultimately, my plan, if we don't have clarity on the situation, I'm going to play De'Aaron Fox. I'll have about a 10% min on him. And then I'll also create a player rule where Davion Mitchell and Fox won't show up in the same lineup. And I'll have like 5, maybe 10%. Because he was at shoot around, I have like a 5% min on Davion Mitchell if we don't have clarity on that situation. I think we probably will, but if we don't, then I'll make that rule and still have exposure to both when no one else is probably playing Davion Mitchell. And then Sabonis is someone else that I'll match field weight exposure on. We know the Timberwolves are a tough matchup, but the sim model likes him a good bit. I'll need to look. Oh, yeah, the sim model has Sabonis as its favorite pay up option on the slate. And so just because of that, I'll at least match field weight exposure. Even though I don't like picking on the Timberwolves. So I personally don't love it, but I'll at least match field weight exposure on it. And so, yeah, I like Sabonis. Fox is good. And then outside of that, don't love too many of the other pieces. And then we have another questionable tag with Anthony Edwards. Again, with these Q tags, with having no late swap, these guys should be a little bit lower owned than they typically would be. But again, that's not fully true because we've seen Anthony Edwards be questionable even after hurting his ankle in the game previously in a back-to-back, and he still played. So I don't really think we'll see the lower ownership on Q tags like we typically will, just because some of these spots don't feel like true Q tags. But anyway, I'm playing Anthony Edwards tonight. And if we start to get news that maybe I should be more nervous, I'll take a shot on Naw, but I don't think it's necessary. And then I'm going back and forth still between Cat and Rudy. I haven't made a decision there yet, but I think they're both viable. If they both show up, that's fine. But ideally, I'll be slightly over on one or the other. And that's pretty much it. Interesting slate for sure. Like I said, when you just look at my ownership and exposure so far, it's dominated by Memphis and the Timberwolves. But again, there's a lot that can happen between now and 7 o'clock. So we'll see. You like Tatum, Jason? I think, yeah, I think Tatum, especially if Luka plays, makes a lot of sense. He's someone that I'll match field weight exposure on, but there's a lot of pay up options I like. If we have a ton of value, then we can really mix and match with a lot of these guys. But again, we'll just have to wait and see how a lot of this plays out. I'm going to try and force as much as I can, but we'll see. Anyway, I appreciate you all. It's Friday. Hope you all have a great weekend. I'll see you all on the pre-lock show, which will be at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. It's for VIP members only. If you're interested in becoming a VIP member, feel free to click the link in the description. Again, on that pre-lock show, myself and B-Dubs will both be on today, I believe. And we will go game by game and really just show what we're doing in the domination station. So we'll show exposure minimums, exposure maximums, and just what we're doing on that slate. So appreciate you all. Hope you have a good one. Peace out, guys.